GM and Ford are losing billions of dollars on all these cars. Why this almost obsessive push?
Well, because it's necessary in order to save the planet, and we're very early in the life of electric vehicles.
How is making a car going to save the planet?
Well, by moving from internal combustion engine cars that emit gases that are greenhouse gases and moving to electric.
But hybrids are 14 times better for the environment than battery electric vehicles. Toyota knows that. That's why they're doing it as far as emissions come out, Seth. But to, again, tie this together, building anything, is building anything good for the planet?
But they realize these products are coming, and it's harder for consumers to charge a vehicle than to fill up a tank of gas right now. And that's weighing heavily. And that's why you're seeing inventory of EVs today about twice the day's supply, which is how the industry measures inventory, twice the day's supply of internal combustion.
If you ever find yourself watching CNBC late at night, you've probably come across Brian Sullivan bringing guests onto his show, Last Call, to lambast the EV transition in America. What amounts to nothing more than manufactured fear-mongering to placate the ad dollars spent from legacy auto manufacturers on NBC's network has a complete counter-narrative to the story across the ocean in Europe. Here in the United States, battery electric vehicle growth has been slow, but ever slightly increasing, still paling in comparison to our friends across the pond. Based off data from the first half of the year from the credit agency Experian, US battery electric vehicle sales account for only 7.1% of all new car sales. That rate for the first 6 months of the year was coincidentally the same rate as it was just in January alone, unfortunately, meaning that there is no noticeable increase in EV sales month to month in 2023. If I ask you to guess what the percentage of new car sales that were battery electric vehicles for the month of August in the European continent was, what would your answer be? If you're in the neighborhood of 3 times America's EV uptake, then you'd be correct. The European battery EV sales accounted for 21% of all new car registrations. That staggering figure represents a growth rate of 62.7% for the year, or 118% for August alone. Pretty impressive figures, but how does Tesla factor into all this great news? Seeing great adoption rates of EVs should be a comforting stat, even if Tesla numbers weren't broken out of that lump sum figure. But thankfully, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association did break down sales by manufacturers. I have 2 big numbers for you to digest for a few moments. The first being 247.4%. The second being 192%. It sounds good, right? They're big numbers. It's going to sound better with context. The first number, 247.4%, represents an increase in sales for Tesla in August of 2023 compared to last year's August. In 2022, Tesla sold 7,855 vehicles during that month, and that is in comparison to 27,285 for August in 2023. Year-to-date numbers brings us to the 192% figure. From January to August of 2022, Tesla sold 61,355 cars in Europe. You'll be happy to hear that this year, Tesla tripled their sales, 179,155 cars. These 2 figures represent some of the greatest growth out of all the manufacturers in Europe. The overall car market is rather healthy still, which is a positive sign because if the continent can maintain this momentum in the face of high interest rates and a lagging economy, sales would likely increase tremendously in a low interest rate environment. Should these figures be of any comfort to Tesla shareholders hoping to see an adoption rate pickup in the USA? Firstly, Tesla's EV sales year over year are rather decent in America, with the first half registering an almost doubling of sales. Still shy of Europe though, since they have almost tripled for Tesla. What Europe has going for it was a stronger shift to renewable sources of energy and sustainable ways to use that energy. This means they've had a head start in the US and it's represented in that adoption rate. But if their curve is a sign for things to come, then we can approximate that the US is about 2 to 3 years behind. In 2020, the sales of BEVs accounted for 6% of all sales in the EU. In 2021, that increased dramatically to 10.3% and increased significantly again to almost 14% by the end of last year. So for us Americans, we're sitting in a zone of adoption that many think will serve as a launching pad to almost double the BEV uptake within a year. Just a few days ago, the Washington Post, which is owned by Jeff Bezos, a notable detractor for all things Elon Musk, had an article published called "America Past the EV Tipping Point, but Many Buyers Still Want Gas." Researchers that dubbed this percentage the tipping point look to the European adoption of EVs, along with the historical adoption of cellular phones and microwaves. As sales cross over the 5% threshold for a particular groundbreaking technology, the S-curve in the chart soon takes over. The Washington Post article makes reference to EV sales in Norway, who were early believers in these types of cars. In 2013, Norway's EV sales were approximately 5%, similar to the American number from last year. If we can overcome the stigma of EVs, then the S-curve could take American EV sales to 80% of all vehicle sales by 2032. For the US to match the short-term trend established by Norway and Europe, we would need to see EV sales be responsible for about 9% of all vehicle sales by the end of the year. If that doesn't come to pass, then the magic tipping point might have found an outlier in us, the American car buyer.